Okay, so for today, we're going to discuss, of course, the topic number 6 now, which covered about the development current architecture views. uh, Enterprise architects who are very effective employ an architect view to demonstrate fitness to stakeholders. Architecture views convey the enterprise architecture to stakeholders, and each view describe the architecture in terms of particular concern. Architecture views enabled stakeholders to make trade-offs between competing needs. Concern are merely subject areas of stakeholders to evaluate the enterprise architecture. So from a pragmatic standpoint, diverse parties will have varying taste and priorities. Developing a simple matrix showing the necessary stakeholders and concerns form the basis of a predictable enterprise design according to our findings in research. Different enterprise architecture applications will require a variety of stakeholders in concern because a good architects will be conversant with the words required and EA purposes. So they are aware that different EA purposes handle different questions and utilize the resultant judgment of various way because consistent comparisons of trade-offs are required for an organization that employs sound enterprise architecture to drive every challenge or to drive every change initiative that move the organization closer to a preferred target. Compulsory stakeholders in issues directly facilitate difficult trade-offs because high-functioning teams from EA are dependable. So they are familiar with the essential issues that needs to be answered, the necessary information, and they reuse past research and decisions, and they provide a viewpoint library serves that the basis building a viewpoint library of a basic process, not simple, nevertheless straightforward. So, of course, at the foundation of a viewpoint, there are certain concerns that serve as the foundation of trade-off. Consider the age-old trade-off between cost and agility or time to market and sustainability. So the set of essential trade-off decisions constitute the required concern. So in reality, actually, a competent architect identifies a time to market and sustainable target. There is no point in performing trade-offs in everything when a skills architect can limit trade-off conversation to instances in which there is a genuine trade-off against competing choice. So to give us more details about the topic, let us all welcome our presenter. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, sir. Hi. Okay, so thank you, sir, for introduction of the topic regarding developing current architecture views. So this is so this current views is within the context of documentation framework and implementation technology. So the current architecture is actually a collection of enterprise architect artifacts, or we'll just call it EA for now, that documents existing EA components through the enterprise. Current EA views are important to an enterprise in what they establish and verify what resources are being used in lines of business to support the achievement of strategic goals. So yeah, let's go to the learning objectives of this topic. So by the end of this topic, you'll able to understand how current views relate to the EA implementation methodology, understand how current views relate to EA documentation framework, and see examples of current views of EA components and artifacts. So for our introduction, so the current view of EA is intended to show the IT resources that are presently active in their enterprise IT's operating environment. So this is also known as is view of DA. So depending on the amount of prior EA planning, these IT resources may or may not be aligned with enterprise strategic goals and business services. If little EA planning is occurred, so there's a significant amount of duplication in function that may be present. So in this figure that I'm going to show, it shows that the current views of EA provides an enterprise with documentation of existing strategic goals, business services, information flows, IT services, and technology infrastructure, as well as common thread areas of security standards and workforce planning. So yeah, so in order for us to create an architecture management plan for our future architecture, we need to be able to formulate our current architecture, what architecture we have on our company or on our business. So it includes a lot of stuff. So like we have goals and initiatives, products and services, data information, system and applications, and network and infrastructure. So this is based on the EA framework, and as you can see here, the information is sort from highest level, from lowest level to highest level. So as you can see also on there's kind of like a three box setup here. So each of the box there constitutes to line of business. So every business has its like there's this aligned current architecture based on the lines of business, and each of the components here are called components, obviously. So and this is the current architecture. So it will be the basis of having the future architecture by having a architecture management plan. So documentation of EA. Okay, so documentation of current EA is very important to an enterprise because it provides a set of baseline reference information and artifacts for planning and decision making. So also by completing the documentation of current EA components at all levels of framework, a view of enterprise emerges that reveals associations, dependencies, and performance gaps between the enterprise business requirements and current capabilities. So, okay. So we also have this concept called home architecture analogy. So having a completed current EA is like having a full set of blueprints for an existing home. It provides an authoritative reference source for future planning and decision making, as well as historical archive that may be required for audit or research purposes. So have obviously in this discussion, having a current view of the enterprise architecture is very important, especially when we are strategizing in our company. So by having a current EA, we're able to see different components of our company, and it's also, as I've said, it will be the basis of strategizing and formulating our current or I mean a future enterprise architecture setup or view. So yeah, that's it. So now we will go to each of the artifacts. Am I correct? Sorry. We go to the each of the artifacts on different components of the enterprise architecture. So we're going first to the strategic level enterprise architecture artifacts. So for current view, here are the things that we need. We have strategic plan, e-commerce and e-govern plan, and we also have the artifacts. So we have the strategic plan, SWOT analysis, concept of operation scenario, concept of operations diagram, and balance scoreboard. So strategic planning produces a high-level view of direction that an enterprise sets for itself. So this is documented in the general strategic plan and accompanying e-commerce and e-government plan, where the role of IT is described in more detail. So the enterprise strategic direction is further articulated in ER artifacts that include long-range scenarios, goals, and initiatives. So strategic plans should look for 5 to 10 years into the future and publish every 2 to 3 years. Yeah. And in my opinion, it's kind of like a very I think it's very long It's very long, but yeah, it says in the book. So the current view of the strategic level artifact should be updated only as changes to the strategic plan and e-commerce or of government plan are formally established. So this preserves the authoritative nature of the artifacts at the level. So yeah, now we are going to the artifacts. So we have the strategic level artifacts. So in the current view of the enterprise architecture, the desired artifact related to the scenario planning is the scenario that has become the current planning context for the enterprise and contains the current planning assumptions. So in other words, of the several future scenarios that are periodically developed through the strategic planning process, one is eventually selected as representing the enterprise is going to do. So when implemented, the selected future scenario becomes the current operating scenario. Periodically, I'm comparing the current strategic scenario to several potential scenarios that are maintained in the EA's future views can be a valuable strategic planning activity. So it's important, as I've said here, as I've said in this part that it's important for us uh, to compare our current strategic scenario to the future potential scenarios for the future because in the future those future scenarios can be the current scenario, and some of the future scenarios can be the current scenarios in the future, if you know what I mean. That's kind of like the concepts. Next is strategic goals. All of the enterprise current strategic goals are artifacts that should be documented in the current EA. Of particular interest are the IT related strategic goals, which are those rely on some element of IT to help to move the enterprise in the strategic direction described in each of several scenarios. So these are in order for us to have a strategic value on our strategic goals. I mean, if we yeah, each of the strategic goals should have this criteria to be strategic, as I've said, as we said. So we should achieve some element of enterprise purpose or mission or goals. Result in an outcome within the scenario that is discernible and measurable. Not reduce the enterprise flexibility so much that in other scenarios cannot be pursued, and or threats of enterprise survival cannot be addressed, and have enterprise support for implementation. So these are the four, sorry, yeah, these are the goals that we need to meet or in order for us to formulate strategic goals or make the goals strategic, have a strategic value. So for example, these are the samples of strategic goals. So one of this is improve global communications availability, quality, and cost. So this goals states that the IT element is the voice, data, and visual infrastructure. So yeah. So this strategic goals, as I've said earlier, it should have some element of IT. It should also like achieve some element of enterprise purpose. For example, maybe the business wants to provide products that are available, low cost and quality. And another is improve product quality and availability. So if you have these strategic goals, or if you're relate this to an IT element, might be related to product manufacturing, quality control, inventory levels, and retail outlet reorder levels. Next artifact, strategic initiatives. So if you have goals, you definitely need to apply it or make it work. So yeah, these initiatives include activities such as mergers and acquisitions, research and development projects, system implementation and integration projects, process redesign and improvement, new market entries, product consolidation, business alliances, and service improvement to internal and external customers. So based on your strategic goal, you might follow each of anyone each of these strategic initiatives. So for example, we have this strategic goal to improve marketing and sales information. So yeah, so you might formulate a lot of initiatives, but for this one, we could have three. So we have, if we really want to improve this marketing and sales information, we can have begin the sales data mart within 6 months, consolidate marketing systems in 2 years, and increase customers by 8% in a year. Yeah. So that's initiatives. And each of the initiatives that you have created, it should be like should be measurable, and it should be like we should have a benchmark, or what do you call this, KPIs, like something like that, in order for us to measure the success of the initiatives that we have formulated, and align it with the strategic goal. If it's like you are measuring the goal itself. So each strategic goal should be stated in the form of that includes a measurable and meaningful outcome. So each could include measurable or meaningful outcome and output measures. Outcome measures describe intended future state, and outcome measures describe levels of activities and items that contribute to achieving an outcome. So we have examples here. So example outcome measure. So improve competitiveness by lower than 3%. Lower than number 3 national market share across all product lines within 1 year. So for this outcome, there's a specific number that you need to target, and specific time frame. It says that within 1 year. So within 1 year, the company should be like in the upper tier of the national market share. And example of another output measure is increase the availability of products in retail outlets by 10% within 6 months. So output for this measure, it's measuring the output of a certain product or services. So for this one, it should like the measurement here is also needs to be specific. So there should be like a figure, a number. So it says that it should increase the availability of products in 6 months by 10%. So obviously that's the measure. So that's all for the strategic level artifacts. So now we can go to business level artifacts. So that's the second one, if I'm going to go correctly. Yep. So we have different EA elements here. EA components. We have supply chains, business processes, IT capital planning portfolio, and we also have other artifacts like business plan, node connectivity diagrams, win name process, business process, service model, business process or product matrix, use case narrative and diagram, and investment business case. So we will going to explain that one by one. I think much more on the process documentation and use case. So you encounter that later. So so one of the many of the artifacts in business level consists of process. So each of the process should be documented. So there are different methods on the documentation of business processes. So we have one method is the IDEF. It's called integration definition for function. So it was developed in mid-1970s for modeling complex military projects. So IDF stands for inputs, controls, or it uses input, control, output, and mechanism to show the parts of activity within an enterprise. So as the illustration here. So we have input. So these are the items that initiate, trigger the activity that are transformed, consumed, or become part. Controls, it guides or regulates the activity, usually indicate when or how a process will be performed. And lastly, the results or the output produced by the activity. The reason for this process was performed. And we also have mechanisms, so like systems, people, and equipment to use the activity. So it's actually whenever we want to model this process using IDEF, you should include this four. Okay. Another method I'm showing this processes is swim lane. Swim lane is pretty familiar in my work because a lot of business process that we are mapping or illustrating uses a lot of swim lanes. So in swim lane diagram, it shows activities in horizontal rows as to identify areas of responsibility for those activities. So as you can see in this sample, so the horizontal rows stands for the areas of responsibility or who should be responsible in each of the process. So if we have here the CIO, the board, the planning group, architecture working group, and program manager. So each of these areas will assign some tasks, and these tasks are pretty much like a workflow. So obviously the first step here is this one and go to this one and go to the other phase, going back, and it's also like if disapproved, going back to the first phase. So it's pretty like a workflow, but each of the work is assigned or aligned with a specific area. That's why they put it in a horizontal way. So it's like a swim lane. If you watch swimming games in Olympics, that it looks like that. Okay. So the third method is a traditional flow diagram. So we have, if I think many of you are already familiar with workflow or creating creating a flow. So we have this flow diagram here. We have the process, which stands, or activity, which stands in the square. We have the decision. So if yes or no, it stands for diamond. And we have the start and stop measure icons here. So yeah, for IT professionals like us, you're already familiar with this. So that's another method of documenting processes. Okay, so I think that's it for that part, documenting processes. We also have another artifact here, business level artifact, project management plan. So it's a standard format document used by project managers, project sponsor, and project team to improve the conceptualization, documentation, tracking, oversight, and execution of project work throughout the enterprise. So the project management plan should be used in new IT system, application, database, or infrastructure projects, as well as upgrade efforts in the same areas. The project management plan should also be tailored to identify the best need being addressed by the project, as well as how the project will be accomplished. So the documents, the overall management concept and approach used to achieve program objectives. So this this part here is describes the contents that we should put in our project management plan, and it's very important to have the project management plan because you will see there the best practices, how we should approach things, business context, and so on. So the project manager usually prepares this project management plan, and during the planning phase, and it always in the planning phase of the project. And so at the minimum, the plan should cover this area. So we have executive summary, project requirements, strategic alignment, architecture alignment, business case, project controls, project enterprise, security and privacy, and appendices. Next artifact is the business cases. So business cases is an analysis of requirements and value of making a particular investment. In context of enterprise architecture, developing a business case for investments in IT helps to ensure that the maximum value is generated from new development projects, as well as ongoing operations and maintenance activities. So if we are kind of like initiating a project or an initiative throughout the company, we should justify it, and that's how business case is created. So we should have a business case. We should analyze, and we should identify the impact of having this project, how significant the impact is, profit wise or process wise, and other stuff. So, and based on that business case, we can say if the project is go or no go, or something like that. So we have 6 areas to be covered in investors business case. So we have a statement of requirements. So we have this part of the business case. It's clearly establishes the business requirement is, and should avoid making any recommendation or solution. So it's just a statement of the requirement. So like maybe we can say that this is like a hypothesis in the thesis. I mean, so I not know. And next, we have the alternatives analysis. So it contains the analysis at several alternatives to meet the business requirement. So this requirement may be to upgrade an existing component in enterprise architecture, or develop new one, or provisioning support services. So these alternatives can differ in recommended process, technical solution, type of personnel, and stuff. So one of the alternatives can be the status quo, or just keep it like that, not or doing nothing. So that's another alternative. So we also need to have the cost benefit analysis. So this can this analyze the impact of the project in cost, or how this will benefit the company business wise. We also have the risk analysis. So we should identify and analyze the risk and how to mitigate them. We also have a return of investment. So this is kind of like calculation of how much return of investment will be if we're going to push with this project, or we should put in, or be able to identify the EA. And selection of alternative with comments and recommendations on implementation. So yeah, once we able to analyze a lot of things, the alternative, cost, risk, calculation of ROI, we can put our decision and add it on the business case. So that's for the business case. I mean the business level artifacts. So we also have information level EA artifacts. So these are the components for that. So we have knowledge warehouses, information systems, and databases. And these are the artifacts that we need to formulate on the for our EA. Sorry, I have to drink water. Okay. So documenting information flows involves the development of data models that shows the structure and flow of data in the enterprise business services and supporting IT systems. So data can be modeled and analyzed using traditional or object-oriented methods. I'm going to explain that later, depending on how the resulting documentation is intended to be used. So for example, if the intended use is within relational databases, or third generation programming languages, so we should use traditional methods, so like ERD or data flow diagrams. So if the use of data is object oriented, so we can use UML, or universal modeling language. So these are the samples, or these are the approaches on illustrating data structure and data flows. So we have the traditional, as I've said. So we have ERD. So ERDs are used by IT systems and programmers to identify the things or data entities that an enterprise wants IT systems to capture, as well as those external entities that the system interfaces with. So as you can see in the illustration, I hope that this is very clear to you. Like this bigger boxes here are the entities. These are the data, different groups of data. So we have the offer, showing, house, property, room, and each of these entities has this properties. So like metadata, like data about the data. So if we have the property entity, we should have the property ID, the address of the property, the property size. If we have a house, we have house ID, styling, size, number of bedrooms, bathrooms, garage size, heating, basement, school zone. So these are the properties of the house. And for the room, type, size, of course, ID. So every entity should have its properties, and also each of the entities should also should also relate it to it you should also relate or illustrate the relationship of the entities to different other entities. So yeah, that's ERD. Next traditional method is the data flow diagrams. So I hope some of the IT people here knows about this. So DFDs actually reflects the process that transform data within the information system. So a transformation can involve creation, update, deletion, or reading the data. So an entity matrix or activity matrix can help analysts and product programmers to move from ERDs to DFDs as they design how an information system will function. So DFDs can be decomposed in very high context level, the basic process level, to several sub-levels that examine each process in greater and greater detail. So as you can see, this is a sample of a data flow diagram. So as you can see here, this is the entity, the customer, and the customer is asking for a job request. So this is the data. It will go to different process, and it will save in different databases or retrieve data from databases to process data on each of the data flow or data process section. So we have 4 here, right? So and this square rectangle stuff here are the databases or tables, or it depends on the project. So we also have the object-oriented approaches. So the first two approaches are traditional, and this is object-oriented. So for object-oriented involves data structure and process together using UML or uniform modeling language. So if you are kind of familiar with our previous subject with Sir, we discussed UML, so I hope you're familiar with that. So objects are specific sequences of code in fourth generation programming languages that represent something in the business requirements domain that an IT system must create, use, or interact with. So objects like entities, in that they have a name and attributes and link to other projects. So there are 3 characteristics of an object. So we have polymorphism. So it means that multiple object behaviors invoked by triggering events. Inheritance. So attributes can carry over between parent and child objects. And encapsulation. So hidden code that protects object attributes and behaviors. So these 3 characteristics should be in an object so that we can determine we can determine that this entity is an object. So object-oriented analysis and design activities begin with the documentation of business requirements in a form of narrative use case. So there are 4 basic types of diagrams that are used to describe use cases. Each of which is an EA artifact that should be maintained at information level of the EA framework. So these are the 4 case diagrams. So we have so first we have the use case diagram. So it shows a snapshot of overview or overall view of the activities and actors in the information system. We also have the class and object diagram. So it shows the static views of things that interact with each use case. We also have object sequence diagram. So it shows how groups of objects exhibit behaviors in response to a specific event called a trigger. And lastly, this object state transition program. So it shows the entire life cycle of the particular object in terms of how event triggers can invoke different behaviors. So these are the diagrams. And these are all artifacts in the data structure, sorry, um, in the information level enterprise architecture. Another artifact that we need to have is the data dictionary. So these are for data dictionaries are repositories of data entities and attributes that enterprise collects and stores in databases. So standards for the format of data are documented in the data dictionary, as are dependencies and roles of the relationships and dependencies among data entities that are identified in ERD. So if you go back, if we go back to the sample of entity ERD, so we will going to document each of the entities here and more details about the entity, like the attributes or the properties, the relationship, which entity is related to one other, and other information. So all of that is included on data dictionary. Next is object libraries. So these are repositories for reusable objects. So from a technical perspective, it is the discrete pieces of programming code that actually make up an object, and that are being stored in object library as a complete reusable unit. So so object-oriented programming languages like Java, C, C++, they develop code segments that are distinct in their identity and function, which are reusable in the object and can be integrated in other applications. So that's object. So it's kind of listing of the objects and how different data of the object, so that we can reuse it on other systems or related objects within the system. No, it's not last. Sorry. We have the service level EA artifacts. So there's a lot. We have software applications, web services, service bus, ERP solution, operating systems. These are the EA components under system and service level, and these are the artifacts that we need to have. It's too long. I will not explain more about that. Okay. So the current view of IT systems and applications should function to show an accurate picture of the software application, so front or back of services and operating systems that enterprise currently has active in its IT operating environment. So in that many of IT resources that were developed in an independent manner, the completed current view of the support applications may show the following. So it might show a lot of integration in areas with requirements of exchanges of information, duplications in function, little or lots of vendor diversity, and where business requirements are not being met. So it's very important to have these artifacts, because whenever we able to finish the artifacts, we will be able to determine these issues. So there might be redundant functions, as I've said here, or there's too many vendors, too many applications for a very little or very few functionalities. And maybe when there are some business requirements that are not being met, maybe because it was overlooked during the project, or it was just pops up after a while. So that's it for that. So let's go through each of the artifacts. So we have the system application programs. So it's sometimes helpful to develop a graphical view of the support applications to show what is present and the general types of functions being supported. So this is a sample of a graphical view of all the applications. So it might be very simple, but in other companies like ours, we do have a lot of application, and it's really hard to map each of them, how they're related to each other. If you're going to do that, it will take a lot of time. And if be able to formulate that, it will be very, very big, and that you cannot see a lot of stuff without zooming in. So this pretty much basic, in my opinion. And there's a lot of arrows and stuff. So what it's still important to have this graphical view so that we can able to see or visualize how different applications communicate with each other. And that's an important EA artifact. Sorry. So additional descriptions and views can focus on specific types of support applications. So it may be beneficial to show a hierarchy of applications such as operating systems at the base, office automation, these applications in the middle, and web application on top. So this is a different image, but if you can go back to the first one, it explains the hierarchy. So web services, ERP, back office, operating system, and networks. So yeah. So another thing that you need to note here in the application program artifacts is the APIs. So our application programming interface, it's a series of functions that software applications use to make other applications and operating system perform supporting actions. So in other words, some APIs define how application will interact with systems and services level of EA. So in my work, we use a lot of APIs to communicate with other systems. So that's the same scenario here. Like you need to have some sort of APIs, like you have the logic, you have the information, metadata, and whenever it was needed, other applications or other level of AAs can able to utilize this and use for their sake. So it's important to map this API as well on your application program diagrams. Yeah, so we have other artifacts here. So system and service interface diagrams. So IT systems are distinct collection of applications, databases, operating systems, and hardware that meet specific business or technology requirements for the enterprise. So these are the few concepts of IT's sorry, IT concepts. We have SOA, or service in oriented architecture. So this approach is used to describe and document IT systems and services within the systems and services level of EA3 framework, and can be considered as a sub-architecture of EA3 framework. So yeah, if you want to document the systems from web services and other IT systems, you can use the SOA. So we also have web services. So it was discussed on the previous paragraph. So what are those? So these are based on TCP or IP HTTP information exchange protocol and open standards information formats such as HTML, XML, and J2EE. So web services are pretty much a platform independent. You can exchange information with other web services in a common operating environment, which is referred to the network application platform or service bus or an enterprise service bus. So web service interfaces with network application platform service bus or enterprise service bus. Yeah. And these are defined by two industry standards. So we have the Simple Object Access Protocol, or SOAP, and we also have the other standard, which is SPEC, or Representational State Transfer. So this is SOAP is an extendable XML format, and this is used by W3C as an international standard. So for REST, it promotes communication between ESB discoverable applications by transferring a representation of that resource in a format that matches the standard data type that is determined dynamically to match capabilities of a sender and recipient. So for REST, much of the format that was being used here is JSON, if you're familiar. And for SOAP, it's always XML. That's what I can say about this too. So we also have like technical standards. So this is another artifact on the system level, enterprise architecture. So IT application should be selected based on the technical standards and protocols from industry, national or international bodies which have no bias toward particular vendors or products. So standards for API, service functionality, and software and hardware integrability should. Ay, sorry. Ano yun? Nagulat ako. Okay, sorry. So the WS. Okay. Okay, I'm going back. So the WSDL web service descriptions and NAP service bus interface documentation are some of the additional artifacts that need to be gathered. So technical standards should be very detailed. Uh, it's kind of like the basis of choosing IT applications. So there's a lot of technical standards that we have like uh, there's a lot from W3C. We also have a project management standard. So yeah, it should be also documented as an artifact so that it can help us to determine which whenever we would like to add additional IT applications, we can go here on this artifact. So we can consider which are those. And okay. And last level is the infrastructure level EA artifacts. So we have for infrastructure level, we have different components like data networks, computer clouds, telco networks, video networks, cable plans, security solution. And for the artifacts, we have this information here. So all the artifacts on this level consists of several documentations. And when we document network documentations, networks, backbone routers, switches or hubs, equipment rooms, wiring closets, and cable plans should be described in detail using both text documents and diagrams that show logical and physical design. Each of the enterprise voice, data, and video network should be documented such that analysis and decision making regarding this current operations and maintenance is supported. Okay, going back there. So yeah, as it says here, this network should be documented because whenever we are analyzing or whenever we revisiting our current networks, should able to see the current one, the current view, so that we can analyze and we can decide what will be the better alternative if we are going to make this operations more efficient or lesser maintenance. So each network, computing cloud, and IT system. Okay, so this part is another documentation. So we have the security documentation. So each network, computing cloud, and IT system that is supported by technology backbone must be tested and certified with security vulnerabilities. So this is done so that the effective level of business support is maintained and that overall IT security solution is established for hosted applications, services, databases, and website. So it's also important to document the security part of the EA because right now uh, the IT world is there's a lot of threats, especially on data. So our enterprise architecture should be able to specify which security practices we are doing, and what will be the impact of the security on the whole EA architecture. So another artifact that we need to remember for this level is the configuration change request. So there should be a standard method for requesting changes to the EA artifacts so that configuration control over the current and future EA views can be maintained. So using an EA change request form is one way to have a standardized format and process for updating EA documentation. So making an EACR form an electronic template helps to promote use by all stakeholders, as that for archiving of pending and approved AACRs in EA repositories database. So this artifact is like it's essential for uh making change request. So whenever we have change requests, we should have this form, and that's considered an artifact. And last, for the artifacts under this level, infrastructure level, is the software and hardware inventories. So they should be periodic, and it should include the enterprise software and hardware assets. So maintaining this inventory helps to determine what levels of investment will be needed for operations, maintenance, and training, as well as major technology upgrades and replacement projects. So for example, there's an old system that is being there for a while, and we want to replace it. So it's important to inventorize or put that information in the inventory, are in that one of the artifacts in the infrastructure level. So using automated inventory system and barcode labels assist in maintaining an accurate inventory as resources are brought into and retired from IT operating environment. So yeah, it should be documented in should be in database as well, especially if your software, it's a lot, there's a lot of software, so it should be there or should be included. So yeah, those are the artifacts under the infrastructure level, and that is actually the last part of the EA, last level of the enterprise architecture. So in summary, uh I have already provided the EA artifacts on each level of the EA framework. So the collection of current artifacts represent as is view of EA, as I've said earlier. So this is important to the enterprise because it serves as integrated inventory of reference information for resource planning and decision making. So having a current view of the EA definitely help us to resolve future issues or replacing existing processes. So current EA is essential in EA architecture or enterprise architecture. So I think that will be all for my end. So thank you for listening. And as we say in Norwegian, tack. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, sir, for a well comprehensive discussion. No? Hindi pa siya ready niyan. Okay. Architecture views are representation of the overall architecture that are meaningful to one or more stakeholders in the system. So, as what I mentioned earlier, the architect chooses and develops a set of views that will enable the architecture to be communicated to and understood by all the stakeholders and enable them to verify that the system will address their concerns. An architecture is usually represented by means of one or more architecture models, no, that together provide a coherent description of the system's architecture. So a single comprehensive models is open to complex to be understood and communicated in the most detailed form, no, showing all the relationship between the various business and technical components. As it is the architecture to a building, no, it is the normally necessary to develop multiple views of the architecture of the information system to enable the architecture to be communicated to and understood by and different stakeholders in the system. So I think that's it for this topic.